The data industry is now very mature. Data warehouses are everywhere. Data lakes are growing by the day. But there's a new foundation for building analytical applications that leverages all the best of these technologies. Find out more on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Say this much, folks. The future of our economy and the global economy, frankly, is going to be largely analytics driven. We've heard data driven for years, and it's good to be data driven. It's good to be paying attention to your information assets, your transactional data, for example, but also your customer data, behavioral data, network data, clickstream data, all these types of things give us indicators. We're always looking for signal from the data, and that signal can then be used as a leverage point to make some change in your business. So what we see nowadays is that analytics is driving so many decisions, and that is such good news for all of us, because when you're analytically driven, you're focused on what really matters to your business. And there's so many sources of information these days. There are so many ways to get a pulse of the business, to get a pulse of your market, for example, of your customers, to know what they want and be able to respond to that. And the key with all of these new solutions out there is data and interactivity with the data. And so we're going to talk about that today with a couple experts. We have Vadim Ogirevetsky of a company called Imply. He was one of the first folks on Druid, the Apache Druid project. I think he was the first user ever of Apache Druid, which is pretty cool. So we'll talk about what Druid is. We'll also hear from Jian Wang from Pinterest. He's one of those folks actually making all this fun stuff happen in the world of analytics. For those of you who are social media fans, Pinterest is one of the long-standing companies, and they've been true to their mission from the get-go. They're not one of these companies that keeps changing their mind about who they are and what they're trying to do, which seems to happen a lot in the social media world. But let's dive right in first, and we'll also hear from Danielle Oberdier of Decayo Data in our second segment. But let's kind of dive right in on open source and why this is such a big deal. So I've been tracking open source for longer than DM Radio, since back in 2005 is when I did some research while at the Data Warehousing Institute. And I was looking really under service-oriented architecture, but also open source technologies. And back then, the Apache web server, which was, I think, the first Apache project, it was a web server that was going up against Microsoft. So basically, Microsoft's had the servers, the web servers that you would use to run websites and to do that whole provisioning side of the business. And in 2005, Apache had risen to be the #1 web server. And I thought to myself, that is pretty interesting stuff. Here you've got Microsoft, which was the behemoth of the industry. They were #1. And then some folks came along and built this open source platform, this open source technology for the Apache web server. And next thing you know, they're the #1 server. Well, that's, 17 years ago. And a lot has happened in 17 years. A lot has changed, to say the very least. And now what's happening is companies are climbing up the stack. The open source projects are not just about the web server anymore. They're data projects, they're analytics projects, they're networking projects, really just about anything that you do with data within the enterprise. There's now an Apache project or an open source project. Linux Foundation is out there as well, which is working on that. And the stuff with Druid is absolutely fascinating. So let's bring in Vadim from Imply. Vadim, tell us a bit about yourself and Imply and how you're taking Apache Druid to the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Vadim. I'm one of the co-founders of Imply. And before me and my co-founders started Imply, we were really working hard on making Druid, an open source project, also in Apache, be a success. And we're still working hard at it because to us, Druid is really the core of Imply's business. And I think kind of to really, you mentioned open source, Eric, and I think we need to just talk a little bit about what it is and why we're doing it.
Sure.
I think the story of how I came to be where I am now is quite interesting because me and my co-founders, we were working at a company that was 10 years ago really at the forefront of analyzing huge amounts of data and letting people play with their data and iterate on the questions that they can ask of their data. And back then, we were in the industry which was really leading that charge, which was advertising. Like, there's so many ads collect so much data, and that they need to be analyzed. We built Druid to be able to power that analysis. So you can load all your data into Druid and then analyze that. But we didn't just build Druid. We were actually building it because we wanted to build a larger application. We wanted to build the car, so to speak, and Druid was really the engine that powered it. And because we were really building the car, we wanted to share the engine with the rest of the world to really let anybody do whatever they wanted with it while we were focusing on building the car itself. So we made Druid open source, which means that anybody can go and download Druid and see how it's made, and it's all free. And we're also accepting and encouraging of community contributions to it. In fact, it's a community-driven project.
And that is real quick, that is such a huge part of this right there. So a lot of people don't realize that the thrust of this industry of creating enterprise software has now moved almost entirely to open source formats, and people refer to things like product-led growth, for example. But you brought up a really good point about sharing the engine with everyone. So any developer who wants to download the code can do so. They can do what they want with it, put it into production if they want. And there are different rules around licensing with that kind of stuff. But the idea is that you share the code and you share the vision and you let anyone play around with it. And then you focus on building the car. And once the car is built, you can build your business model around that, either through licensing or support or whatever the case may be. But the idea is that you get that software into the hands of people who can use it, and you do it very early in the ball game, and you keep it open source. And there are lots of benefits to that. I mean, one of the things we talk about all the time is that bad code goes away. If everyone can see the code, you don't have as many bugs, at least over time, and you get that community support. You get more eyes looking at things, coming up with ideas about how to do things, and that's very helpful in the design process, right?
Absolutely. And you can even think about it, getting it in the hands of as many people as possible is really the name of the game and what we're always trying to achieve. And you can think about it, if you compare it to a closed source database, maybe like Oracle or any closed source database, they might put up billboards on the highway that say, hey, try our database. Well, we go one step further. We give you the database, free, and you can do whatever you want with it. And then when you fall in love with it, we're here to help you with support and tools and all the things that you need around that, which is what Imply, the company I co-founded, provides.
Yeah, and I really love your approach. So to give some background to folks, when we talk about analytics in this industry, there's a long history of how we generated analytics. So data warehousing has been a mainstay of the information industry for, 40 years now, at least. And some people thought it was going away as Python and R came in and data science, but that's not going to happen. You're going to have that data science world in conjunction with the data warehousing world from here till the end of time, it seems to me. Neither of those are going to go away. But the point is that there was a very long and somewhat tedious process to get to the point where you could do analysis on your data. In fact, originally we pulled data out of ERP systems, for example, and other source systems to get them into a technology that can analyze it. That's what the data warehouse was designed to do. But what you've done is very interesting. You've kind of collapsed that whole process. You've thought through the entire process of discovery, of kind of understanding your data, to building some predictive model, understanding what you want to achieve with your data, and then of course, putting that in action. And you collapse that entire process into one rather interesting and compelling view. Can you kind of walk us through how it works when you use Imply? What do you actually do with it?
Absolutely. I mean, it fundamentally, a database, which is what Druid is a place where you can load all of the data that is happening. Maybe you're running a website. One example is Netflix, which uses Druid to analyze user behavior on the site. So if you are visiting Netflix and you're watching a movie, or you're searching or browsing for movies, you can see, like, they collect that data and then they can put that into Druid And fundamentally, Druid can answer the question of like, okay, which videos are being watched the most, which users are interacting with which content, who's having the best experience, who's having the worst experience by country, by city, by internet service provider. Anything that you can imagine that Netflix might want to answer about their users' experience on their site can be answered with Druid. And the way that Druid achieves that is by being able to load data that's real time, data that's happening right now. Literally, somebody is clicking on Netflix show to start watching it right this second, and that event is already enjoyed before I finish saying the sentence.
Wow.
And then they can store years and years of data in Druid. So you can blend this real-time and historical data in one system, and you can say, how is what this user doing reflected by the experience of how they've behaved since we had them as the start of a customer. And that is fundamentally what we provide to people.
Yeah, and just to kind of put this in context, and I'll bring Jian Wang on from Pinterest is joining us today to talk about what they're doing with their data. But the point that Vadim is making here is very significant. There is so much data available now in these cloud environments. If you're Netflix, for example, can you imagine just the stunning, breathtaking amounts of data that are out there? Well, the faster you can ingest that and process it, and what happens is you have all sorts of predictive models kind of in the background, churning away, looking for things to suggest. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to figure out which movies does Susan like? Which movies does Fred like? How long do they watch this movie? If you drop out 5 minutes in, well, probably you didn't like that movie or something happened in your house or whatever. But when you can collect that amount of data in aggregate and then analyze it, especially real time, then what does Netflix want? Netflix wants you watching Netflix. That's what they want. They want you focused on Netflix, watching with your family, with your friends. What does Pinterest want? They want you using Pinterest. So the better that Pinterest can do at giving you useful information, and I'm on their email lists. I'm a Pinterest user. The better off they can serve you. So let's bring in Jen Wang from Pinterest to tell us a bit about that. Jen, tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing with Imply or with Apache Druid for Pinterest.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'm Jen Wang from the real-time analytics team at Pinterest. So basically, our team uses Druid to build a backend for the data analytical system for Pinterest. So our use cases span from advertiser reporting to organic creator reporting to internal A/B testing, metrics analysis, all kinds of analytical use cases are powered by Druid nowadays. So one of the reasons we use Druid is I think it's helpful to talk a little bit about the history. So previously we were on another technology called HBase, which is basically a key value store. So the reason we need to migrate is the data model of key value store is now a direct fit for analytical use case. For analytical use case, you generally want to filter on some dimensions and then do group by on some dimensions, which a key value store just allows you to fetch a value from a key, which makes it really hard for us to develop good analytical products for either our internal teams or the external facing advertisers for sure. So we evaluated a lot of technologies and at that time, and then finally we found Druid, which is an open source analytical database built specifically for this use case. We found that although there are maybe some missing cases, for example, for the scale of Pinterest, we may need to do some improvements by ourselves, but it has the majority blocks already there, more than any other databases at that time. So we adopted and then we run it in-house. As Vadim mentioned, it's open source, so every code is there. So it's really a plus for us to look into the code and then add whatever feature missing that we want for our specific scale. Yeah, so far it's been good, and also it enables us to power what previously we cannot do. For example, as we are growing into a company that tries to provide more value for both our pinners and creators. We want to show metrics to our creators and advertisers that, okay, users are using what you are posting. So we build like the real-time reporting pipelines for advertisers and creators. So they know that, okay, every second people are looking at the pins you created. So they are seeing business values from using Pinterest as well. So that's one really big plus for using Druid to enable the real-time aspect.
We're talking to Vadim Ogilvetsky of Imply and Jian Wang from Pinterest. And Vadim, I'll throw this back over to you. What I found so interesting when I was talking to you folks, I guess a week or two ago, was that you really thought through the entire end-to-end process of building applications for business benefit, because that's what we're really doing here. And what I found so fascinating is that if you think about the old way of doing analytics, even like embedded analytics, for example, you take any number of technologies and you'll do embedded analytics these days, like Looker or lots of other versions you can use. But you're still using a separate technology that you're then bolting in essentially to the operational system to feed some score, like it's a customer retention score or a churn score or something like that. What you've done is much broader than that, it seems to me, and you're focused on enabling the design and deployment of analytically driven apps for the business. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think one of the things we do at Imply is really supply an end-to-end solution around Druid that is built around Druid, that still uses Druid as its core. It's like a car that uses like Druid as the engine, but provides something from start to finish, from deployment to actually surfacing your data in an interactive tool. And we find that very important because a lot of the times people come to us and they want to really spin up an application and be able to service to the users in absolutely no time. They want to do it in a week, maybe a few days. And at Imply, we make that possible. And we still give you all the power of Druid as the engine underneath.
Yeah, that's so cool. And real quick, I'll throw one over to Jian before we bring Danielle in. Jian, you mentioned at the end there that streaming is really taking over streaming analytics. For example, there are technologies like Kafka, of course, which, speaking of open source, came out of LinkedIn. That's the engine that ran LinkedIn. Lots of people are using Kafka these days. And the power of, here's my big question to you is, I've always wondered, with streaming analytics, you can solve a lot of problems right now that you used to solve a week to 10 days later, meaning there was a signal that came in, someone was alerted, they had to go doing something and to take care of it, but there's a delay of, let's say, a week, a month, it could be longer. But with streaming analytics now, you can solve those problems right away. So how much do you think will streaming analytics solutions solve new problems as opposed to solving old problems faster?
Yeah, good question. So I think definitely we need streaming. We need to bring in streaming because, as I mentioned, for some of the use cases, we can't afford to wait for maybe 1 day or even 1 hour or 15 minutes. We want to we want to speed up that process to let the decision making of our users as quickly as possible to iterate. But at the other aspect, we still need we sometimes still need the batch pipeline. That's because some of the process of cleaning the data cannot happen right away. So we need more time to basically clean the data or join with other events. So to make the source of truth data. So we want to deliver the good thing about both words. We want to deliver the speed based on the streaming pipeline. We also want to guarantee the data is correct based on the batch process. So I think ideally we need a lambda architecture where we have both a streaming and a batch pipeline to bring the best of two.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I mean, and this is the cutting edge, folks. So if you're out there listening and thinking, wow, we don't have that, don't worry. I mean, what you're hearing on this show is the cutting edge, the razor's edge really of innovation around data. And what Jian is talking about is being able to use not just the immediate data to solve problems right now. Operational analytics is a term that's being used a lot these days, but also the traditional batch process where you focus more attention on cleaning the data, making sure it's trusted, certified. Customer data, for example, you want to make sure that's all correct when an order goes out, just as a just as a flashpoint there. But yeah, this is the cutting edge of what we're seeing. It's very, very exciting because the faster you can identify an opportunity and capitalize on that in your business to change something, the better off you're going to be. And these days, that cycle time is down to days or weeks at most, not months and years. You don't have the luxury anymore of sitting around and waiting and planning your whole year out. I mean, I see it in the budgeting space. Companies don't plan the whole year out anymore. Some people do. That's pretty rare. You plan like a couple months out ahead of time because you just don't know what's coming. But with that, let's bring in Danielle Overdeer from Dikayo Data. I'm sure you've got some questions for Vadim and Gian. I'll hand it over to you. Take it away.
Hello. Yes, I definitely have some questions. I'm going to ask Gian first. I know that Pinterest is very, very visual based because I use it for visuals of all kinds, fashion, witch spells, whatever I want to do at the moment. And so I'm wondering how your algorithms interact with the visuals. You can say anything you want about how that's changed over time. And is image processing involved at all?
Oh yeah, good question. So yeah, definitely. So we are basically like a visual discovery engine. That means we power our engine with like algorithms to like get you the best content that maybe fits your interest or fits your discovery needs. So so in terms of the recommendation engine, that's basically run by a whole different organizations at Pinterest. So we throw a lot of engineers into and data scientists into inventing the most intelligent recommendation algorithms. Druid is more so basically in terms of the stuff I work on, Druid is more like a complementary system that data scientists uses to analyze. For example, let's say so there's a concept called A/B testing, where basically you run two different versions of code, where let's say one experiment gives you this content to this type of user, the other experiment gives you B type of content to that type of users. These two groups of users are kind of similar, but based on the experiment result, we know that experiment A actually delivers better experience to people, so that we ship that experience. So Druid is more on that analytical aspect to basically give the data scientists insights on what algorithms we should use to give you content recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, because we were talking about Netflix, and I know that Netflix definitely has increased algorithms, so does Spotify. So I was just curious how that works for Pinterest, because it is so visual, and maybe less about audio, though maybe that's changed. I don't know how many videos and audio images that you have. And I know I have a lot of collections for various things. And I'm sure that definitely informs the algorithm over time. I've been with Pinterest on and off for 12 years, so very interesting stuff. And for Vadim, I wanted to know about Polaris. I know that that's a new release in the cloud, and it's really interesting to hear about your evolution as the first user and the creator to now. And I guess what can the listeners listening now get excited about for Polaris? And is it more B2B, or is there an open source for customers to play around as well?
Well, the exciting thing about Polaris is that it makes setting up Druid and running it complete. It's just like a point and click thing. It's probably about as complicated as signing up with Pinterest. And I think that one of the things about as I was saying earlier, like one of the ideas about open source, the fundamental idea behind it is really trying to get it into the hands of as many people as possible by removing the barriers to entry, because how it's so easy to just be able to go to GitHub and download a release, download the code and run it yourself. But not everybody actually wants to like download code, spin up servers, provision stuff and mess with that. If you're more interested in the visuals and the data, then and you don't care that much about servers, then Polaris is really the thing for you. Polaris takes all the hassle of actually deploying Druid out of the experience, and it's something that we have also like a free entry trial too. So if you want to play around with Druid, depending on your like alignment, you might be into getting the code from the open source, or you might be into signing up for Polaris. But we want to serve both of those types of people.
Well, my podcast focuses on diversity. It's called Data Fem. So Eric and I work together a lot on, his million shows and my one show. So I am curious about if you could say more about the barriers to entry and if that has anything to do with ethical AI or improving diversity in, the coding space, whether it's low code, no code, or whether it's more technical GitHub. And John, I'd love if you weighed in on as well what Pinterest is doing with ethical AI and imaging, because that's something that's really important to me.
Yeah, actually the barriers to entry for running open source Druid is really I was referring to the ability to just download the code and run it on your computer, or you probably want to try it at a scale. You probably it's a distributed system, so you don't really experience it unless you put it on many computers. So if you work in an organization that maybe is very protective over its instances, maybe you have to get special approval within your organization to deploy a couple of servers with this cool project that you just heard of on the radio. But with Polaris, you can just sign up and just start using it. So we want to make sure that if you don't want to talk to your DevOps people, you don't have to. and that's what the barrier we're trying to remove with Polaris.
It's such a big deal because the market changes, your business changes, you will change. What you want to focus on, what you want to learn about is going to change day after day. And the more you can future-proof your information systems, the better off you're going to be, because guess what's going to happen tomorrow? Something is going to change, whether it's going to be new products, new way of looking at things. You're going to find, for example, that a certain demographic really likes your product, really likes your service. You want to be able to pivot quickly. I think that was a hallmark of success in the pandemic, quite frankly, is the companies that had good analytics, the companies that knew their data, that understood who they were able to pivot very quickly and solve problems. Well, folks, we'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.